What did you get in trouble for in elementary school? In grade 3, they asked us to draw anything that came to mind. I have no idea why, but I randomly decided to draw a gun. I made it very detailed and was quite stoked on the design, but when the teacher saw it, she made me erase it and draw a sunrise and called a special meeting with my parents. If you want kids to draw the sunrise, ask them to draw the sunrise.
That's an interesting story. It's funny how kids' imaginations work. Drawing a gun seemed normal to you, but the teacher clearly had different ideas. The way adults handle kids' creativity can be pretty over the top sometimes. It would have been better if they just encouraged what you wanted to draw instead of shutting it down. Makes you think about how we shape creativity in kids.
My friends and I were pretending to be bugs during recess. I was a scorpion. I shook my butt and said I stung one of the other kids. He pretended to die. I was put on a timeout bench for the rest of recess. This was kindergarten 25 years ago, and I still don't know why I was punished. Kids were getting killed by lava monsters all the time.
That's a classic childhood moment. It's funny how we can be so creative and carefree back then. Being a scorpion sounds like a unique choice. Getting put on the timeout bench for playing like that seems a bit unfair, especially since other kids had their own wild games. Kids really do have their own rules when it comes to play. It's wild how those memories stick with us.
In first grade, I was in the bathroom at the urinal doing my business, with 2 other kids there as well. I head to the sink to wash my hands, and as I turn the faucet on, I hear, "Hey, want to see something funny?" One of the kids turns to the other, pants on floor, shirt pulled up high, and pisses all over him. The piss-drenched kid turns towards the offender mid-piss and begins a spraying counterfire. They both start sobbing during battle, and I try to sneak out, not wanting to be part of it. 5 minutes later, they both walk into my class soaked in piss and tears. They tell the teacher I did it. I had to change my gold star to a silver star. Worst day of my life.
That sounds like quite the scene. Kids really don't think things through. It's funny how quickly things escalated from a joke to a full-on battle. And then to be blamed for it all? Classic. Just goes to show you can be minding your own business, and chaos finds you. Changing that gold star must have stung a bit, though. Sometimes school days really have their own kind of ridiculousness.
One time me and my buddies got in trouble on the playground for skipping rocks and accidentally hitting the teachers with them. I also got in trouble in kindergarten for using the urinal in the bathroom and having my pants fall all the way down to my ankles because I had no idea how to keep them up at that point.
That sounds familiar. I remember messing around with friends and things getting out of hand. Like the time we threw a football and it ended up breaking a window. And the kindergarten story is classic. Everyone has those embarrassing moments. We all had to learn some way, right? Just part of growing up. It's funny looking back on it all now.
My mom gave me money to turn in to my teacher for an upcoming field trip in kindergarten. On the bus ride to my house, I realized that I'd forgotten to give it to the teacher and was worried my mom would find the money once I got home. So I gave the cash to my best friend on the bus so she could go buy some ice cream and get rid of the evidence. Teacher asked mom if I was bringing any money the next day, and I tearfully broke down.
That's a pretty relatable story. I remember doing something similar. I was supposed to turn in some money for a class trip, but I ended up losing it on the way. I felt really bad, but my friend helped me out and just said to let it go. It was a mess, but you learn a lot about trust and friendship in moments like that. It kind of sticks with you.
When I was in 3rd grade, I tried out for the play The Wizard of Oz the previous year. I didn't get a part, and I always wanted to try and act. I auditioned for the Cowardly Lion, and I eventually got a second audition. Meanwhile, the whole time, this jerk named Sergio kept telling me that I would never get the part. Later on, I find out that I got the part as the lion, and I was so happy that I yelled out to him, I got the part and you didn't. Well, all of a sudden my teacher flips her shit because she heard me and said that I was being so mean telling Sergio that he didn't get the part and that I did. So she gave him the part instead, and I ended up having to just be one of the guys that put straw inside the Scarecrow shirt, which had no lines and was so brief. I'm 26 years old, and that still bothers me to this day when I think about it. Ugh.
That's a tough break. It's wild how those moments stick with you. Trying your best and then getting sidelined like that over one comment must have felt pretty unfair. It's funny how sometimes the people who try to bring you down end up getting their way. But hey, at least you learned a lesson about how things can change quickly, and it's okay to feel that way even years later.
I was in second grade, and it was one of the days where we had to bring our bicycles to school to use during PE. We were learning how to ride safely and use proper hand signals, etc. I kept asking the gym teacher if I could go to the bathroom, and he wouldn't let me, so I eventually rode my bicycle right off the bicycle course and toward the bathroom. Unfortunately, I didn't make it the whole way, and I peed in my pants and all over my bicycle.
That's a classic kid moment. It's funny how we think we can just ignore the rules when nature calls. I remember a similar situation with a friend. He was so focused on playing that he didn't want to leave the game, and he ended up regretting it. Sometimes you just can't hold it, no matter how hard you try.
We were messing around with those plastic irrigation control boxes, half buried in the ground, and managed to turn on the water over a holiday weekend. The playground and field were built below street level by about 6 feet to act as flood control for the neighborhood, as well as the park nearby. And when we came back, the thing was damn near full. We were laughing our little asses off until we all got called down to the office. Edit failed autocorrect.
That sounds like a classic childhood move. Just messing around and causing a bit of chaos without thinking about the consequences. It's funny until you get called in to explain. I remember doing something similar with friends where we flooded a baseball field. We thought it was hilarious until the adults got involved. Just a mix of innocence and trouble, and a story to tell later. Good times.
In kindergarten, the teacher called me out in front of the whole class and scolded me quite harshly for not wearing socks to school. I felt shame. I was devastated. She made me sit in the hall. Between our classroom door and the neighboring room's door was a little table that held all of the snack time supplies. My shame faded quickly when I realized I could hide under the table and munch on animal crackers from the bag that was left open and overhanging the edge of the table.
It's funny how moments of embarrassment can turn into something pretty nice. I remember a time in school when I got in trouble for something silly. I thought it was the end of the world, but then I found a way to make it fun. Like sneaking snacks when no one was watching. It's those little things that can change your mood, you know? Just a simple escape from the awkwardness.
The only time I can actually remember being yelled at was in first grade. The very first days of school, I pretty sick, vomiting and such. So I go back to school, and I figured out that if I pretended to vomit, I could get out of class and go to the bathroom for a while. Well, I did it a little too often, and I got yelled at for pretending to be sick. The real kicker was a few weeks later, when I really was sick, I asked to go to the bathroom, and I was told to sit down. I ended up vomiting all over the girl in front of me.
That's a memorable first grade moment. Kids will do anything to avoid class. It's wild how pretending can backfire like that. Getting caught is one thing, but then actually getting sick and being told no? That's rough. I guess it shows how sometimes playing the system doesn't work out. Imagine the poor girl in front, though. That must have been a scene no one ever forgot.
My friends and I played a game of never-ending dodgeball throughout school, and one time my friend was peeing in the bathroom urinal, and I got him so good. He would have done the same, but then he complained, and I was made to sit on the bench for the next 3 days. The following morning on the announcements, they said, "Don't play in the bathrooms."
That sounds like a classic school moment. I think most of us have those wild stories from childhood where things just got a bit out of hand. It's interesting how a harmless prank can lead to unexpected consequences. The whole announcement part is pretty funny too, makes you realize how serious the school takes bathroom rules. It's just part of growing up and learning boundaries, I guess.
I attacked a boy in first grade. We were always fighting in class. My teacher got sick of it and sent us both out to the hall to wait for the principal to come get us. The funny thing was, outside of the classroom, we got along really well. We sort of bonded in our terror. We both talked about how our parents were going to beat our asses when we got home, and with what. They made us sit in the isolation room together, and we kind of chatted back and forth when we could to keep each other from going mad from the silence.
That's interesting how you can get so caught up in the moment but then find common ground outside of it. It's kind of funny how kids can switch from enemies to buddies just like that. Those moments can be awkward but also relatable. It's good that you two had each other to lean on in that tough spot. Makes for a wild memory looking back.
Said the word shit under my breath, not knowing what it meant, but remembering that a middle school-aged neighbor used the word. A classmate told on me, and I had to explain to my teacher that I had no idea what that word meant. And then I learned what it meant when I brought the note detailing what happened home to my parents that evening.
That's relatable. I remember a time in school when I accidentally used a word I'd heard from friends, not knowing the context. Got in trouble for it too. Had to explain myself to the teacher, which felt awkward. The worst part was facing my parents later. It's funny how little things can lead to big lessons in language and respect. Kids learn fast from their mistakes.
I was trying to crawl through the concrete tube on our playground, but some kid was blocking the way. He said he was protecting the spiders that were inhabiting the crack in the center of the tube, and he wouldn't let me through. So I kicked him in the face. That's how I spent my last day of first grade in detention.
That's a memorable way to end first grade. Kids can be pretty intense about their territory. You just wanted to explore, but that other kid was being overly protective. Kicking him probably wasn't the best move, but I guess it got you noticed. Detention must have been a nice quiet end to an eventful day.
You know the game where you say, first is the worst, second is the best, third is the one with the treasure chest. Well, in second grade, instead of saying treasure chest, I told the third guy he had a hairy chest. He started crying, and I had to stay after school, so my mom could be told what I did.
That's a classic childhood moment. Kids take everything so seriously. I remember making a similar mistake once. I tried to be funny but ended up making someone upset. It's wild how a few words can change the mood. I guess we all learn about consequences early on, just by trying to joke around. Staying after school wasn't fun, but it taught me to be more careful with my words.
Was at a school sleepover. Everyone was watching a movie while sitting under tables. I decided to write sex and girls and poo under all these random tables. Turns out the teachers found it the next day and busted me. I was forced to scrub the words off the underside of these tables for like 2 hours. Grade 3 was fun.
That sounds like a typical school night. Everyone was just trying to have fun, and you had your own way of doing it. Getting caught must have been a drag. Scrubbing those tables for hours, though, that's rough. Grade 3 had its moments, I guess. At least you have a story out of it now. Kids do some wild things sometimes.
In second grade, I got caught playing Go Fish in class, and my teacher wrote a note about it on my Friday report. So instead of getting in trouble with my mom, I hid my report under my bed all weekend. Told my mom I didn't get one that week. Forged her signature, and it turned in on Monday. I know, pretty badass.
That's something I can relate to. I remember in school, I once tried to hide a report card that had a bad grade. I thought I was being clever, but my mom found out anyway. It's funny how we thought we were so smart back then. Kids can be really resourceful when they want to avoid trouble. Life lessons start pretty early, I guess.
Pulling the chair back on my best friend, causing him to fall over. We were in a war to see who can do that prank to each other the most. He was up by 2, and the one time I get him, the teacher catches me and makes me apologize. He won that competition by default. Edit word. Thanks /you/ guy outside your window.
That kind of prank war sounds pretty fun. It's always a mix of excitement and risk, especially with a teacher around. It's interesting how one moment of fun can lead to an unexpected consequence. Your friend must have gotten a good laugh out of it though, even if you didn't win. Apologizing probably made it more awkward, but at least you have a story to tell.
I had a couple one. Got in trouble for sticking my tongue out at the camera during the class photo. They actually tried to charge my parents for the entire photo shoot for that too. Looking up sex in the dictionary and showing it to other kids 3. Accidentally brute cracked the computer administrator's password in elementary school, which gave access to all the teacher's files and grades.
Sounds like you had an eventful time in school. Sticking your tongue out must have been a bold move, and the whole photo charge thing seems a bit much. Looking up that word in the dictionary probably sparked some interesting conversations. And breaking the admin password? That's a risky move, but I can see how that would have gotten some attention back then.
On the first day of PE class in kindergarten, the teacher explained that when she yelled freeze, everybody would stop. I decided to try yelling it for myself. A few years later, this teacher told my class that on the same first day, I had also complained that sitting on the floor for instructions was too uncomfortable and asked if there was a chair I could sit in. I don't remember this, but it sounds like something I would have done.
That's a pretty relatable story. Kids often try to assert themselves in little ways. I think it's funny how you didn't even remember complaining about the floor, but it feels like something we all thought at some point. Little things like that really shape our personalities. Seems like you were just being practical early on.
I used to fight my friend Jerry back in the 5th grade. One time my friend and I ambushed Jerry in the hallway. My friend was holding him and I was giving Jerry light punches to the stomach. Jerry was making absurd noises like, "Oh, oh, oh." My teacher saw us and says, "Let him go." She runs to Jerry and asks, "Are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, we just mess around." And she turns to us and is like, "It's TIFU, you guys got 2 weeks detention, LMAO."
That brings back some memories. I had a similar thing happen in school. My friends and I would play fight in the halls. One time, the principal caught us, and we thought we were cool, acting tough. But yeah, we ended up with a week of after-school detention. Not the best way to impress anyone. Just some silly stuff from childhood that seems funny looking back.
List of things I didn't get in trouble for. Getting kicked in the nuts full strength. Getting held down and forcibly kissed by several girls. Getting chased by a bully until I fell down and ripped a giant hole in my pants and knee skin. Getting punched in the shoulder. Reason was racism so hard that my eyes watered. But I maintained eye contact and didn't break down. Being put in a wrestling hold and forced to kiss the ground before he'd let me go. List of things I did get in trouble for. Taking some baby carrots from the cafeteria outside with some friends and throwing them at each other.
It's wild how we often get in trouble for the small things, right? I mean, those experiences you had sound rough, but somehow it's the baby carrots that landed you in hot water. Kids can be pretty weird about what they choose to enforce. It's like they missed the main events and honed in on the snack attack. Classic.
Funny story. 2nd grade, I stole a Kit Kat bar. It was out of those boxes that you use for fundraisers. I started shaking when I gave it back to the teacher. Then crying. She figured it out. I never stole a single thing ever again. Seriously. Tragic story. Fifth grade math teacher screamed at me for 10 minutes after class because I had to use the restroom during class and took too long. I had to poop, but I have a really tough time going when other people are around. So I wait until they leave and then go. I was gone for 15 minutes or so, but was not ditching. She screamed at me and told me I could never use the bathroom again. For some reason, I believed her. I cried to my sister about it. She told my parents. They yelled at my teacher. Fun times.
That time in second grade is pretty relatable. Stealing something small feels like such a big deal back then. It's wild how fear can change your behavior so quickly. Then that fifth grade story hits differently. It's tough when teachers don't understand that sometimes you can't control your body, especially in that kind of situation. Glad your sister had your back. It's funny how those memories stick with us.
Making a mess by rubbing my eraser on the carpet and leaving it, figuring someone would clean it up. It left an obvious mark. Teacher threatened to look through all our stuff until he found the owner. He was an old grump who would have done it too, and done it slowly and meticulously. As you watch your fate slowly approach, and you confess before the big, angry, scary man found everything and got you. I cried in front of him and his whole class. Few years later, when I was a student in his class, among the eldest students of the school, it turned out to be a sort of thing that happened. When someone was out of line, he'd chew them out in front of his entire class, frequently leading to tears. He had a real reputation for doing it too. He would praise students in front of his whole class too, but when a messenger showed up saying that so-and-so has to go to the principal, it was pretty terrifying. Mr. J from Hangatiki Primary School, New Zealand. Amazing man.
Sounds like Mr. J really had a way of making an impression. I remember a teacher who could make you feel small, too. The whole class would go quiet when he got mad. You'd just sit there hoping it wasn't you he was after. He had his moments of praise, but those were rare. It's strange how those experiences stick with you, even years later. Teachers really shape how you see things.
So in second grade, our classroom sat in 3 columns of 3, rows of 2. For whatever reason, I was plopped right in the middle of a column of mostly boys. I'm a girl. They got rowdy and teased me, and whatever. One day, for show, until I brought my new Barbie. Original, right? As I sat back down after the girls in the class oohed and ahed, the boys were all snickering at me. So, to impress them and be one of the guys, I let the boy next to me undress her. My teacher happened to walk by just as poor Barbie was losing her dignity, and I got detention for the next 3 days. My mother was mortified when she picked me up and didn't let me order from book club that month.
That's a classic school moment. Trying to fit in can lead to awkward situations. You brought a Barbie, but it backfired. The boys teasing and then the teacher catching you made it worse. Detention for 3 days sounds rough, especially with your mom being upset about it too. Kind of unfair for just wanting to be part of the group. At least you learned something from it.
In first or second grade, I didn't have a good concept of the difference between purpose and accident. I was playing some kind of game, and my hand ended up violently drifting into someone's cheek and making them cry. When the teacher asked me if I had done it on accident or on purpose, I quickly exclaimed, "I did it on purpose," which probably shocked our teacher, considering I'm a very laid-back, quiet person. She put me in timeout against the wall for 10 minutes, and I continued to plead my case, crying hysterically, but it was on purpose. I hit him on purpose. I don't know if she understood my mistake, but I did get punished for it.
That's a pretty wild story. I can imagine the confusion on the teacher's face. Kids don't really grasp concepts like purpose or accident. It's funny how you own up to it so boldly, though. I guess you were just trying to be honest in your own way. Getting in trouble for being straightforward is tough. But hey, we all misinterpret things when we're young. It's just part of growing up.
Me and my idiot friends would play tennis with our hands against a wall with a tennis ball. Well, we didn't have a tennis ball one day, but we had something else that we decided to start lobbing onto the roof and catching it as it fell off because it wasn't bouncy enough. What we got in trouble for using was a giant rock, and we're basically lobbing it, so that could have fallen and knocked any one of us out.
That sounds like a risky game. It's wild how you went from a tennis ball to a giant rock. I can imagine the panic if one of you actually got hit. I had a similar moment when I tried using a baseball bat to hit a soda can off a roof. Ended up breaking a neighbor's window. Sometimes, not thinking things through leads to some pretty unforgettable moments. Glad you all came out okay.
There was a lice outbreak in my 2ND/3RD grade class, and one girl in my class had lice. I was like 7 or 8 at the time, so I didn't know shit. Someone told me to go ask her if she had lice, and I was like, well, alright, because I didn't even know what lice was and didn't realize they wanted to be assholes about it. So I asked her if she had lice, and she started crying, and I had to go to the principal's office because I bullied her apparently. The entire time I was like, what did I do? She hated me from then on. /. I got lice when I was 9 and got rumors spread about me, and I was fairly unpopular until I left that school, so what goes around comes around, I guess. ETA. Just remembered I also got in trouble for forging my mom's signature on a test I got a bad grade on. The thing is, I felt bad about it / I was bad at forging, so I ended up scribbling it out and having my mom sign it anyway. I used an erasable pen though, and my teacher erased all the marks and got mad at me. I got it signed anyway, so who cares?
It's funny how kids can misread situations. Asking that girl about lice seems innocent, but it turned into a whole thing. You definitely didn't mean any harm, but it shows how sensitive things can be. And then getting lice yourself just turns the whole story around. That signature forgery? Classic move. Kids always find a way to get into trouble. At least you got the last laugh by getting it signed anyway.
When I was in kindergarten, I found a bag of what I thought were cherries someone had left on a bench. To make conversation, I said, "Hey, are these cherries?" to a second grader walking by. For some unknown reason, he said, "Why don't you throw them against that wall to find out?" And for some greater unknown reason, I thought this was a scientifically valid test and proceeded to throw the cherries at the wall, where they made lovely red splotches with a satisfying thwack. Eventually, a teacher came by and yelled at me, and I got benched for the rest of recess.
That's a pretty classic kid move. I can picture it clearly. You see some fruit, ask a simple question, and then end up launching them at a wall. It's funny how you trusted that second grader's idea. Teachers definitely don't appreciate that kind of experiment. Getting benched must have been a bummer, but at least you left your mark, literally, on that wall. Makes for a good story later on, though.
In second grade, I got into trouble for one of my tics. I have Tourette's syndrome. I had to roll my eyes in a very exaggerated way, every 30 seconds or so. My teacher had been glaring at me during the entire lesson, and I didn't really know why, so I just tried to keep my head down and stay out of the way. As we were headed to lunch, she pulled me aside and told me that I was the most disrespectful, rude child she had ever taught, and that I should be ashamed for making her feel like her lesson wasn't worth my time. She told me that I needed to stop rolling my eyes immediately or suffer the consequences. I had no idea how to hold back the tics. I ended up being sent out to the hallway for the rest of the day to think about my attitude.
That sounds tough. I can't imagine being in second grade and having to deal with something like that. It must have felt really frustrating to be misunderstood. Tics are hard to control, and it's rough when adults don't get it. Being sent out to the hallway only adds to the stress. Kids shouldn't be punished for something they can't help, especially when they're just trying to get through the day.
In fourth grade, I got in trouble for talking during math. It wasn't me, it was Tom who sat in front of me, but I was no snitch. I had to go sit in the hall. Everyone knew the principal, Lee Bottom Layton, would walk the halls. If you were sitting in the hall, he would take you back to his office, and you had to write about what you did. You had to take it home for your parents to sign. I told my parents what happened, They signed the paper, no questions asked.
It's funny how things play out in school. I remember getting in trouble for stuff that wasn't my fault too. Like one time I got blamed for something a friend did. It was awkward having to explain it later. I guess it taught me about loyalty, even if it meant getting in trouble. Those days felt so intense, but now it's just a memory. Crazy how parents didn't question stuff, huh?
In 5th grade, I was bored of the traditional games at recess, so I invented Slide Wars. The game was simple: divide the class in half, positioning one half at the top of the slide and the other at the bottom. First team to get all of their members to the other side were the victors. The 5 minutes we got to enjoy was the highlight of recess for my life. Needless to say that when the teachers saw the whole class attempting to cram into a single slide while trampling over one another, they lost their shit. The rest of the year, we were forced to walk laps in silence.
That sounds like a classic playground moment. I remember when I tried something similar with a group of friends. We built a makeshift fort and turned it into a secret base. It was all fun until a teacher found us and shut it down. Sure, it was a bummer, but those little rebellions are what made school memorable. It's funny how those quick moments of fun can stick with you.
For some reason, my school decided that it would be healthy to ban salt in our school. Naturally, being the entrepreneurial type of kid, I started selling packets and shakers of salt during and before lunch. Eventually, I got caught and got some sort of detention / and school suspension. My parents kept the discipline referral slip and bring it out every now and then.
That's a classic move. Nothing like taking advantage of a weird rule. I remember a friend trying something similar with snacks during a diet phase at our school. They ended up getting caught too. It's funny how those rebellious moments stick with you, especially when your parents keep bringing them up. Just shows that no matter how strict the rules are, there's always room for a little creativity on the side.
Talking and being from an immigrant family, my mom used to discipline me. Since my mom was so busy working and my brother was in high school, I didn't really have anyone at home to talk to. A 7-year-old at home for 4+ hours alone almost every day. I would do all my socializing at school and in class. It was a self-perpetuating cycle, haha.
I get that. Growing up in an immigrant family can be tough. You end up finding your social life in school because home is quiet and busy with work. It's interesting how that solitude shapes you, making school a lifeline. You learn to navigate social situations and connect with people there. It's kind of funny how those early experiences stick with you, right?
For Thanksgiving when I was in 3rd grade, we had to write what we were thankful for on paper turkeys, then color them. Little me thought it would be nice to shade over the words I'd written in a light brown, so the turkey wouldn't have a stark white middle. Mrs. Simon swept my turkey up and, to my horror, said, "Class, this is what not to do to your turkeys." In front of everyone, I was mortified. The best part, though? When I arrived home in tears, my amazing mom took me right back to school and let Mrs. Simon have it. In my memory, she is a fierce mom warrior fighting for me. So cool. Happy Mother's Day, Mama.
That sounds rough, having your work criticized like that in front of everyone. It's nice that your mom stood up for you. I remember a time when I got called out in class too. I felt embarrassed, but then my parents backed me up. It definitely helps to have someone in your corner, especially when you're a kid. Moments like those really stick with you.
Please consider subscribing if you enjoyed. Love.